Well, welcome to the next edition of The Extraordinary Life with Jean Rule. I'm here with my good friend Nicole. We're gonna say her last name is Doe, even though it's not, only because Nicole is a foster parent. Because there is some risk involved in being a foster parent, I would say. So, welcome, Nicole. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
We met in the summer of 2016 in Portland. I knew right away that I liked Nicole and I wanted her to be one of my friends in my circle. Partly, I think, because we had so much in common. Only you're actually smarter and more creative and talented. And so I'm like, yeah, she's going to teach me a few things, that's for sure. And you have. I've only known you 4 years and already you've taught me a bunch of things. So, well, can you start out, Nicole, by giving us a little bit of your background? Tell us where you were born and raised and what your education was and how you made your way to Portland.
Sure. So I was born and raised in the Midwest, and both my mom and grandma had home daycares, and then they both became directors of child care centers. So we always had kids lots of kids in our house, lots of kids in and out of our lives. And then I was a nanny for the time I went to college to become a teacher, and I taught in the public school for 7 years. And then I met my husband when he lived in Portland, and I lived in the Midwest, but he was unemployed and came back to live in the Midwest to be close to his parents. His father, his cancer had relapsed, and so he moved back to support his parents, his dad's treatment. So we dated and got married, and I always knew that he wanted to move back to Portland because he loved the Northwest so much. So eventually looked for a job and we came back out here, and I know we won't leave because he likes it so much.
You arrived in Portland in what year?
Oh gosh, 2011.
Okay. And there was some difficulty in conceiving your two biological daughters, correct?
Yeah. We couldn't get pregnant. They did mild tests on me. They don't really test for fertility treatment stuff very much. I mean, they test to see if my tubes were blocked or whatever. They just start pumping you full of drugs till you get pregnant. Mm-hmm. So we did eventually get pregnant with our first daughter. The labor and delivery and everything was fine. And then 18 months later, we had another little girl. It was BOGO baby, free baby, after we paid so many thousands of dollars for the first one. The second one was free.
Okay. Well, you landed here, and not long after you arriving, you had a situation that resulted in an adoption, right? You're adopting your son. Can you tell us how that transpired?
Yeah. So we had lived in an apartment for a little bit, finally sold our house in the Midwest and moved into a house in the fall. And then our church had started to volunteer for a foster parents night out, where families are approved through DHS, and DHS trains and approves the workers. And ours was 2 churches that had come together with volunteers. So it's all sanctioned by DHS, and DHS brings the families in, but it's run and paid for by the churches. And so we decided to start to volunteer at that in our church and in our small group within our church. So my husband would stay home with 10 kids. And then all the other moms and dads would go volunteer at Foster Parents Night Out, and other people from our church too in the other church. So we met foster families through that. The woman from our church who was running for it works training foster parents, and she joked that I was the next foster parent because I was in the infant room holding babies. And a woman had come to our church, was pregnant, and told part of her story and testimony. I mean, I briefly remember meeting her, but a couple weeks later, I met her doula at a party, and she had said, "Oh, this woman lives close to you at the new house that you bought." And I was like, oh, I remember her. And so we took her food and we spent time with her. I mean, she was 8 months pregnant. We saw her, I don't know, once or twice a week for a while. And then she had her baby. The doula who went to her church was living with her. Like, she had support. And then after a few weeks, she couldn't take care of him because things changed. And her friends had to call DHS. More than one person called DHS to ask them to investigate because she could not care for him any longer. And so DHS, the rules are kind of weird. So her relatives in town couldn't take care of him because where they were at in life. And to DHS, because we had spent time with her, now only a month, but to DHS, we were considered like a relative placement. And DHS said, like, they came to our house, looked at our house, looked at our family, and said, "Do you want this baby?" And we said, "Yes, we want this baby." Like, yes, you're just going to hand me this woman's baby? Like, it was really hard at first that we felt like we were taking her child. And then they came to our house and interviewed us in 3 hours and gave us a baby.
Mm-hmm.
So that eventually led to adopting our son. And we are back in contact with mom. Mom is stable. Mom comes over every week to see him. We have a great relationship with her. It was a long road to get there, it felt like. And the beginning was really difficult. But now it's in a good place.
Mm-hmm. And he is now 6 years old? Is he?
Yep.
Cool. So that started a desire or an interest in becoming a more active foster family, correct? Not only did you take in your son there and have an open adoption, I believe, where the biological mom comes every week to visit
Yes.
when she can, correct?
Yes.
So since then, you've taken in, I don't even know how many. Do you keep count?
Yeah, so I have a chalkboard in our room with every child's name we've ever had in foster care and their birthday.
Mm-hmm.
So we just got a new placement 3 weeks ago. So he's our 24th child in care.
Mm, wow. And most of them are toddlers or infants, correct? You tend to take in ones that can't remember you when they leave, I think is the way that I think about it. It's like you make such sacrifices for kids that will never remember you.
That is correct.
It's pretty amazing. So 24, you said, huh? What do you think of the foster care system, especially your experience in Portland, Oregon? What's your impression of it? How could it be improved? How is it broken? What drives you crazy? You know, obviously you haven't given up, so you're still beating the drum.
Right. It's been 6 years. I've had a lot of frustration. So what's frustrating is that it's very compartmentalized. So you can't just have one person to go to for things. Basically, it's organized so that our home certifier is our person to go to, and the caseworker is for the child's things to go to. But the caseworker just is managing everything. They have a lot to do. And if you're not on fire, then people don't get back to you necessarily very quickly. My system to communicate with DHS has served me very well, where I email everything.
I would imagine it's because if a child is ill or headed to the emergency room or has difficulty breathing, major things that you need to get a hold of them and make them aware of.
Yeah.
What is the process of going through to get your foster care license? If somebody is listening to this and is like, wow, this is kind of intriguing and that's something that we could do, what does somebody have to go through to get their license?
Yeah. Google where you go in your state for the DHS office. But every state, although there are different rules for numbers of kids in states, every state has classes that you take. And then you have a home evaluation. Now, they're looking to see if your home is safe, obviously. They're looking at the physical home if it's safe. But what they're really doing is looking at your family dynamic, your support system, your history. When they say it's a home study, it's really you and your family they're studying to know that you're a safe place for a child and not like a traumatized child. I mean, obviously, you can have your child and be a safe place for your child, but that doesn't necessarily mean bringing a traumatized child into your home is a good idea, depending on where you're at in your journey. So that's what they're studying. And some placements can be great for you if you are approved, and some placements cannot be great for you because kids can bring up your previous trauma as well. And that's why that home study needs to be thorough and you need to be honest, because dealing with traumatized kids and their issues and your own can be challenging. And some placements for you are better than other placements. Some age groups, gender, whatever the case might be, your certifier needs to know those things about you so they can place a child in your home.
Yeah. I think oftentimes over the years, looking in at the foster care system, I never really had a close inside peek until I met you. But I recall thinking that, oh, geez, how sad it is for a child to have to go from home to home to home. And I guess I always imagine it was because the child was just unruly or not being able to be handled. But it sounds like oftentimes it could be the family and they're not having a good fit.
Yeah. And the way the system is set up here, there is an emergency placement where some kids will go to a home for just a short time, just so the state can look for a relative or a better fit placement. So a lot of times children do move, and it's from that initial emergency placement to another placement. So they do have time to try and look for a better fit, or so they have time to look for aunt and uncle, grandma and grandpa, family friend that's close to care for that child, so that they can approve somebody that already has a relationship. And other movements have to take place because foster parents get divorced, foster parents leave out. Like, that's not a right placement for that child because of their trauma or their needs. Like, they can't be served there anymore. There are a lot of reasons to move. So we would try to have children not move homes, but sometimes that's just necessary. And sometimes children move because they need to be placed with a sibling set. You place siblings where you can, get them into a safe home, and then work to find a home that can take all the siblings together, because that's best for siblings to be placed together if possible.
Broken people in a broken system. No wonder why it's tragic in a lot of ways. Well, we should let the cat out of the bag and talk a little bit about a deeper connection we have. I know I mentioned that I met you in the summer of 2016, but it was really in a time of crisis in our family's life that we met you, because my grandnephew, Jace, was an emergency placement that was placed in your home. My nephew, his dad, Lucas, was someone that we had invited to move from Florida to come visit us when we were living in Portland at the time, just to kind of get a fresh start in life. And he met an old girlfriend and they conceived Jace, and they just weren't in a good place, a good position to raise a child. She had another daughter from a previous relationship. And so here it was the four of them trying to make ends meet without any resources to do so. And it put such a strain on them that eventually they turned to drugs which spiraled out of control, and homelessness and domestic violence and neglect. And it got to the point where we were asking Child Protective Services to investigate and to hopefully take Jace out of their care, because we just didn't think he was safe. At the time, they were living in a van, traveling from parking lot to parking lot and neighborhood to neighborhood in Portland there. And so I had lots of friends in Portland and made some calls and tried to line up a couple of good foster families that we knew to take him. And the day came where they actually did. They tracked him down to a parking lot somewhere. They were able to remove Jace from their care. He was 20 months old. And the families that I had lined up fell through for one reason or another. And they told me, well, we had to place him with this other emergency placement family that you don't know. And our heart sank, because you just never know what kind of setting that is going to be. And lo and behold, it was you. Can you tell us from your perspective what you recall those early phone calls with DHS?
Sure. So we had 5 kiddos in our home at the time, and we had said that we would do emergency placements. And emergency placements are, like I said, when we wait for a relative or a different placement. And so we had a string of boys, and that stayed for 3 days to 2 weeks. Given that they were all emergency placements and they had found relatives for them. And so they called us and told us they had a toddler boy and told us a little bit about him. So they always call, they tell us the child's first name, approximately how old the child is. Now, let's just say these are guesses. This is just what they think they know. These things aren't always true. It's just their best recollection. So we would take this placement. So then they said, okay, we're going to go find him. And I asked, what does that mean? That you're going to go find him? Do you not know where he is right now? And they said, no, we know where they hang out. We'll find him and bring him to you. We'll call you when we track him down, which is frightening. After what they had told me, I was very upset that they did not know where he was. So then when a child comes, we get their bed ready. We get a tippy cup of milk, put in the fridge, and snacks out. So when they come in the door, we immediately hand them food so that they know that they're safe. We got just a stack of handmade quilts from Project Linus. We got them from our adoption resource center in our town. And so we always get out a new blanket for the child. And then we used to have a woman from church that lived with us, and she handmade us a bunch of stuffed animals so that every child that comes into our home gets a new stuffed animal too. Sometimes kids come with things, sometimes they're in garbage bags. A lot of times they smell like things that I don't want to know. And I have to wash everything and see what's salvageable. Some drugs, they can't bring anything with them. I mean, it depends on where they were at. So we have clean things to hand them when they come in the door. The second they see us, we hand them food. And so we got his things ready. We told our kids, and we tell our kid's name, age. And then sometimes kiddos come after bedtime, but if they come during the day and we know kiddos coming, we put our kids away and watch a movie so they don't overrun this new scared child who's been very traumatized they're traumatized anyway, but they're traumatized being removed from their parent. Very, very stressful. And so we don't want them bombarded by 5 children meeting them. And so we put on a movie. So I remember Jace coming to the door. He was very tiny. He was very dirty. And he had marks on him. And so he came right in, ate food right away, and chit-chatted a little about where they found him. They dropped off his bag. That was it. They really do just leave you with somebody else's child. Like, just it's always kind of shocking. I mean, the child doesn't have any attachment normally to the person that removed them. Sometimes they have a trauma bond, but most of the time it's just a person who took them from their parent and they don't want to see that person anymore. They're happy to see you because you gave them food. Mm. And then Jace needed to be bathed and he screamed in the tub. He screamed being bathed for a long time, over a year. Yeah, he hated water and screamed every time we tried to bathe him. And we don't know why that was. So we had to work on that and have therapy with that.
He still has issues with water, so I wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of accident or bad experience. Yeah.
We don't know what happened, but he could be bathed after a while. We just knew that was really difficult for him. And then we slowly got introduced to the kids, found our son Tim to be his new little best friend. They're very close in age, only 6 months apart. And so he adjusted to that, having a friend, but he also had trouble sleeping. And we had to really work on sleeping and feeling safe. And the first 2 weeks, he screamed basically all night. And I had to stay up with him and hold him. We had planned a camping trip, and I was very concerned about taking him on a camping trip with us. And my husband's like, let's just go. We can always drive back. Lo and behold, he loved it because they had been living out of a van. And we went to a dirty campsite with no running water and 6 children. He loved every second of it. Sorry. He loved being dirty and running outside and playing, and got to see his real personality, and he slept better. We were out in a tent, and that's when I felt like he really adjusted and started to become part of our family at that point, because we got to see more of what he was like at that point.
Well, I recall the day that we got the call, Dave and I got the call asking if we would be a family placement for him as an adoptive resource. We were going through kind of a trauma ourselves. My husband's job had come to an abrupt end. He was college president. It was the pinnacle of his career. And somehow he got in the crosshairs of some trustees that just didn't see eye to eye. And he was looking for another job. And that weekend, we had just tried to get away and clear our head and wrap our brains around the fact that our life was going to change, and we didn't know what the next step was going to be. And here we were in a hotel on the beach in Oregon, which is about as spectacular as you can get. That was the setting where I said to, I think his name was Chris, Child Protective Services, I said, okay, we'll step up to the plate. We don't know what life is going to hand us, but we'll commit to something like that. My sister, who is his official grandmother, is older. She's almost 70. And it just wasn't in the cards for her and her husband, who was 80, to take him. They lived in Florida, and we're one of 10. I'm one of 10. So I'm one of the youngest ones. And even in my mid 50s, we were the closest relative that was prepared enough to take him in. And so that was the plan. And then within, I think, a few months, you took him with the understanding that it was just going to be an emergency placement. And then you came to a conclusion shortly after that. What was that?
Well, so they found you as a relative, but because you were in another state, it makes the process longer. And then we had seen Jace's behaviors and how he came into our care very traumatized. And we just felt like moving him wasn't right. We knew we could keep him longer. Like, we knew we had room for him in our car. Like, he was getting along well with his son. He had trauma, but we felt like after the first 2 weeks, there was a while in the first 2 weeks where I was like, I didn't know if I could do it every day, because he was screaming those first 2 weeks. But after that, after the camping trip, we thought, okay, he's adjusting to our family. He knows our routines, but he still had behavior and speech that needed to be worked on. And we just didn't feel right looking for a different placement for him. Because I stay home and homeschool our children, our life is very, very routine. And which can be very, very comforting for children. And so we thought, if he goes to a placement and has to go to childcare, that's going to be really difficult for him. Or what if they have kids he doesn't get along with? All these things in our mind where we just thought it's probably better if he just stays with us. And they hadn't found a placement that they thought that he would work in. And so we had decided that it was better if he stayed with us. And he stayed with us a long time.
Yeah, almost 2 years.
He's been our longest placement. But we felt like it was a good fit for him to stay with us.
Well, and you got an Aunt Jean.
Aunt Jean's a hard worker.
We'll have to explore this. I don't know if we've actually ever talked about it. I just assume that no one has been like me in your life, as far as foster kids go. They're relatives who eventually take those kids, those 23 other kids that you had in your house. I get the impression they don't just show up at your house 3 to 5 days a month, live in your spare bedroom, scrub your house, clean your yard.
I love it. We can all do that. Now, normally when we have relative placements, they're in the state. And we've had placements, people that come visit, but normally we're in a drive, we're at least in a couple hour drive where they can come and visit, where you had to drive several hours.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, we both homeschool, we were both educated teachers, and you do lots of great work.
Yay. I knew that'd come in handy one of these days. Well, it was a joy to be able to come down and become Aunt Jean. You guys don't have a coffee pot, so I'd have to go up to Starbucks every morning and get a cup of coffee and get some lemon loaf, and I cut it into squares, and that was my signature. Aunt Jean's here, and she's got the lemon squares. So let's dig in, and I get the one with the icing on it. Eventually, he came to live with us. The rights of his biological mom and dad were terminated, and we were able to adopt him. He came nearly 2 years right after being with you. Can you describe the process by which you helped him understand that he was not a member of your family and how he grappled with that concept? I know he was 20 months old when he came to be with you. And obviously at that age, kids barely have, a handful of words in their vocabulary. And here in your care, you taught him some really adult concepts that he had to grapple with as a 3-year-old. And he didn't even have his 4th birthday when he was with you. How did you do that? And how would you recommend to others? What did you see that helped?
So we have, like you said, kids normally 5 and under. And so we have developed a lot of toddler preschool language that helps them. And so we say that we're your today family. And then you have a forever family, and we don't know who that is yet. And the today family really helps them know that we're a family. We love you. There's like a normal family. We do things together. We help each other. We love each other. We do our chores. We work together. But that's just for today. And our forever family, we don't know. That could be, if we know there's a placement like you, we would say Aunt Jean or mom and dad. And kids, almost all our kids have called us mom and dad too. We just know that we have 2 moms and 2 dads, and that's fine. Some kids have 2 moms and 2 dads. And then we have a picture over our fireplace that is our forever family. We put children's pictures up. We have books of pictures of them with their families. We've had kids take pictures to bed or put them up next to their bed or their families. There are pictures everywhere, but there's this one specific picture over the fireplace that is our forever family. You do not go over the fireplace unless you are in our forever family. This is very, very, very concrete for a toddler or a preschooler who is learning to talk. But that picture over the fireplace is our forever family. And when our son was adopted, it was a big deal that his picture went over the fireplace, that he was adopted, that he was ours forever. He still has two moms, but the judge doesn't decide his life anymore, that he's ours forever. And we teach all our kids that it's the judge's decision. It's not my decision. It's not your decision. It's the judge's decision where your forever home is. And we don't know that. And we don't know the future. And you have to be very, very, very concrete with a preschooler. It is very difficult to explain. It isn't emotionally trying as an adult, but as a toddler and a preschooler, you barely have words and the concepts to understand. And that is our very concrete way to teach that and the words that we use.
How did Jace receive that?
He had a lot of hate for the judge.
Great.
A lot of anger towards the judge. Sometimes you just got to be angry. And really, in foster care, it's hard. It's hard to be angry with anybody. There's really nobody to be angry at. Yes, your mom and dad made mistakes, but they had a lot of hard choices. They had a hard life too. They love you very much. They did the best that they could. And your foster family loves you very much, and they're working very hard for you. But they don't choose if they get to adopt you or not. That's not always in their control. They could want to adopt you and not be able to. The relatives are first, which is great. It's great for them to relatives first. But that can be really, really hard. And that was hard for Jace. Why weren't we adopting him? Well, there was no option for us to adopt him. And so he was very angry about that. And that's okay. That's okay. That is, you be angry at the judge because that is the judge's choice, that we know we're not your forever family. That is a lot of conversations, and we have our vocabulary simplified and chosen. And that is the vocabulary we use with our family members, with you and your family members, with our friends, with church people. Like, that is everyone. We use that simplified language. So kiddo hears it again and again, little by little. Everybody's saying the same thing so they can slowly process what is happening. And it is very difficult.
Mm-hmm. He still struggles, I think, more than your average kid with anger and frustration and rejection when things don't go his way or he can't get his way. It's just his default. It's getting better. We've had him now for 2 years, and we definitely see progress. So we thank you for your hard work, all that hard work that you and your husband and your kids put into his life as well as all those other kids. It's just amazing. Why? We should probably add that a year and a half ago or longer now, wow, time flies, you conceived your baby, your unexpected little girl. So
yeah, she's 8 months old today.
Oh,
she climbed up the stairs for the first time today. The whole flight of stairs.
I saw that photo. Oh, the whole.
Oh yeah. Great. Obviously, we're not trying to conceive. Didn't think that we could. Doctors said we couldn't. And so we had 6 kids, our 2 bio girls, and our son we had adopted. And we'd had placements after placement. I mean, we've had a lot of placements. We've had 6 kids for a long time. I've had at least 1 child in diapers for the past decade, if not 2, 3, at 1.5 in diapers. So then we discovered I was pregnant, which was very exciting. But then we had to think logistically about that. And thankfully, we had a kiddo who was moving to a relative. And then we had a kiddo go to our friends who we'll eventually adopt.
Well, and I believe right as you had your daughter, you took in another infant. So you had your biological infant and someone else's infant at the same time. You realize that people think this is not.
Listen,
like,
my baby was born in September, and then the new baby was born in November. It was fine. And then that baby,
all the difference in the world.
Yeah, that baby got to go to mom. And so then we got another baby that was born on Valentine's Day. It was fine. That was our Valentine's Day date. And then we had 2 babies.
I've seen your little one, and she is an absolute bundle of joy. I don't think I've ever seen her upset or cranky. She's just all smiles and giggles. I just love her.
And those little babies were just a couple months younger than her, but we line them up to do diaper changes, and then she'd force that little baby to hold her hand while they were lined up doing diaper changes.
You're training them young. Nicole, why do you do it? Why do you take in all these other people's kids? I mean, the energy and the prime of your life.
We do love it. My husband says that we're a big family stuck in a little family. I mean, we've really grown in our love of the Lord for sure, in meeting people we probably would never meet. The kids and their parents, we probably would never meet in our normal lives or know about their experiences. And our children are better for helping take care and be siblings and be a family with other children. And there is sacrifice for your family, but you grow together and learn to care for other people. And it's a mission your family can do together. You're living your life and they're your children for the time, but it's your mission field too. And it's great to be together and live your life and do your mission at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think when I looked at foster families before I met you and just from the outside, I never really gave it a lot of thought how I could get involved, how I could be a part of that journey. I never really conceived getting our foster care license. We had thought maybe about adopting when we lived in Michigan, but we moved several times. And so just the timing of it wasn't right. So I think from having spent some time with you, I realized just how many people live their life without any concept of how they can be a part of the solution. There's so many kids out there. I think the statistics goes something like 400,000 kids are in foster care every year. Yeah, that's a lot of kids. And a lot of them don't have a home to go to. A lot of them are stuck
45% go to non-relative placements.
Mm.
So that's what I'm considered as a non-relative placement.
And then when a home isn't available, at least in our area, I know they're being put up in hotel rooms with their caseworkers.
Yeah.
It's really sad.
Yes.
Mm. And so obviously the number one thing that families could do is become a foster family, right? Or investigate it and give it some thought. Down from there, I always thought that respite care is such a great ministry because you aren't making a lifelong commitment. You're not making an everyday commitment, but you're making maybe like once a month commitment where you give a foster family a break by taking in those foster kids on a, maybe like a Friday through a Sunday or Friday through a Monday morning, just to give them a break once a month. And you could develop a relationship with that family and have the same kids come every month. And so it's kind of like, especially for grandparents, maybe whose kids don't live or grandkids don't live close by. It's such a wonderful way of being involved in a very special way in the lives of kids. Down from there, what what are some of your suggestions? I mean, just me coming into your life and seeing the need. I think the thing that strikes me the most about you, Nicole, and your family that was different from me is that I like to have my house really super clean.
Gee, that doesn't happen with 6 children.
Exactly. I mean, I did have 3 kids, but, I was always like a project person. I was always painting and cleaning and, I had everything just so. I come into your house and there's like fingerprints all over and there's always like a ton of crumbs on the floor that are being swept 3 times a day. And there's always shoes and laundry and an overwhelmingness of just stuff. But what I saw is a family or an adult who had their priorities different than mine. Your priority was placing value in another human being's life. And it extended beyond your own flesh and blood to these perfect strangers who were oftentimes in traumatic situations and dealing with the state agency that is still, in the dark ages in some ways. And that really made an impression on me, Nicole. And that's something that I think I'll always be grateful for, because today I'm doing less of that. My house is a lot messier than it used to be. And I'm actually
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. And although it would be nice to have some of these projects that I have finished, I decided to kind of put them on hold and work on something like building relationships like you're doing. Adopting Jace was probably the first step, but even beyond that, being able to go back, do these interviews and revisit old friends to tell their stories and be more relational and place a value, a higher value on relationships rather than on the stuff and the homes and our possessions and how we think we ought to live. And I'm really pretty excited about it. And so I really appreciate you being able to meet with me and tell our stories together. It's really a joint story. It's more than just an interview. Well, I have a few things I want to ask you. I know you are an encourager. And so what would you say to the family that's contemplating becoming a foster family?
Take the classes. I would say take the classes even if you don't think you want to do it right now. In our state, the classes that you take mean that you could be a foster family, you can do respite, you can adopt. It's the same class for all of those things. So if you're not sure where you're at, taking the classes is great, because even if you decide now's not the time to foster, you could still do respite. Or maybe you're thinking adoption is what you're wanting to do, that you're wanting to adopt from DHS because adopting from DHS is free. But maybe that's really not where your life is at right now. Maybe fostering is the right place for you. It's a pretty big place to start for most people. A smaller place to start is looking for organizations in your area. In Oregon, there's With Love Oregon that gives supplies out. Foster Parents Night Out in our area is amazing. That is a once-a-month commitment that is not in your home. You go to the location. You meet a whole bunch of foster families and foster kids. Some of that is overcoming the fear of what foster children or being a foster children are like, or what being a foster family is like. There's a whole variety of foster families. They all look different. And meeting a whole bunch of foster families in that setting is wonderful. You learn that your family would fit in. And then what I would love is, if you know a foster family, is to specifically help them, not through an organization, not through anything set in stone, but just that you know that foster family and you offer them respite once a month. You take them a meal without being asked. You go over and fold all their laundry or wash their windows with fingerprints or to empty their dishwasher and wash their sink out. Those things that you see that need to be done, you do without being asked. Um, because helping that foster family, just that one foster family, is such a big help.
Yeah. Well, I did all those things for you and more. And I can attest there's so much joy and satisfaction that comes from doing that for you guys. And so I highly recommend. It it did a lot more for me than it did for you, I bet. What would you say to the social worker who's feeling overwhelmed with the foster care crisis that they are employed by? Mm.
I mean, if you can make it past 3 years, you're amazing. Their job is just very difficult, just overwhelming with just the number of kids that they have. They're being asked to do the impossible. And they're just trying to put out fires. And so that they need to learn how to schedule things and manage their time and set aside personal time, but also be easy to contact if there is an emergency. It's very challenging. We have had a couple just amazing caseworkers that can do that have set aside time for themselves and their family, and then still can focus in on work and show up on time and respond to emails. It's very, very challenging. And I really think it's 3 years, and then you'll be a caseworker for a longer time. That first year, their turnover is ridiculously high for first year caseworkers because it's so hard to learn to manage the stress and manage the amount of work they're asking you to do. 30 cases some of our caseworkers have had, and that's cases. That's not number of children. That's so hard, knowing their children's story and their family's story and managing all of that. And if you can train your foster parents to email you like I email people, I'm all for that becoming part of the system. That's just how every foster family is taught to document things and respond to people, unless somebody else has a better system.
You probably don't want to become one yourself. Well, I was thankful that Jace's caseworker was the same person all 2 years. So what a blessing to have Christina in our world, which, just having that relationship as the adoptive resource with her, it helped me because there's a culture that a lot of people have an attitude about these caseworkers that they're vilified, that they're really going to come and take your kids away if they find you spanking or disciplining or something. And I didn't really see that as being the case. They work very hard to keep those kids in their biological mom and dad's home at all costs. And it's really only in the most tragic of circumstances are these children removed. And partly because there's no place to put them. There's so few homes in comparison with the need. So it's not like, okay, they're just looking for reasons to take kids out of their homes. What would you say to the child that's been shuffled from foster home to foster home and ages out? There's so many, I forget what the statistics are, but it is high, of those that never find a forever family and age out, and now they're 18 and they're on their own. Yeah, they're navigating life.
That you can still find a family that loves you, that you can still find somewhere to belong, that you are lovable, and that you really do need to seek out people to belong to. It's important to belong to a family. It's a part of a group.
One of my interviews that I do in this series, Jean d'Arc Campbell, he was adopted at age, I think, like 24 or 27. Yeah. And what an amazing family he was adopted into. And it just changed his world forever. It's just so amazing story. So never give up, right? That there's always hope. And he's a perfect example of it. What would you say to Jace? What would you encourage him if all goes well, we'll have this recording for many, many years. And as he gets older, he'll be listening in on this and hearing what you have to say. What would you say to him?
That we love you very much. We still miss you. And that your mom and dad loved you very much. And they did the best that they could. You know, they tried to take care of you. They saw you when they could. They wanted to be with you. They wanted to keep you, and they just couldn't.
Mm. Well, I'd love to have more time to talk about homeschooling, your homeschooling journey. You're just one of those amazing homeschool moms. I know you're planning on teaching in a kind of a co-op setting next year, and you've already told me that you have lesson plans like scheduled out until next spring. I hate you. I hate you. I know. You're just one of those. I never can measure up. Okay. Well, you often hear it said that homeschooling can be a negative for abused children, right? Because they don't have that mandatory reporter exposure. What is your thinking about that? You know, just let's touch on that one point before we bring it to a close.
I think that that's an extreme. I think that people that abuse their children are put in stressful situations, and that's in a public school setting or a homeschool setting. And if you look at percentages of kids removed that were abused, it's more in the public school setting. Like, it's not, I mean, yes, there are extreme cases of homeschoolers that they're using homeschool to cover up abuse, but that's what they're doing. They're using homeschool to cover up their abuse. They're not setting out to homeschool to train their child. So I don't think it's right that people phrase it that way, that there are more abused homeschool children, or that people are using it to cover up abuse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and a general homeschooler is not always at home. They're at co-op, they're at activities. There are mandatory reporters. There are tons of moms. There are tons of other adults around. They have relationships with lots of people. They're not secluded. I mean, so I don't think it's right to characterize it that way as some people do.
Mm. This is my final question that I ask everybody. And so hopefully you've given it some thought. If you were to bury this interview in a time capsule and in 10 or 20 years from now, dig it up, what would you say to your future self, or your kids, or your husband?
I tell my husband, thank you for putting up with me. And I tell my kids that I had a good time taking care of them, and I enjoy teaching them new things and watching them learn and grow. I don't know what I would tell my future self. I thought about that, and I don't know. Maybe I'd say finally take some time to rest.
That sounds like wise advice. All right. Well, thank you, Nicole. I'll let you go. I think you said your daughter is going to be waking up soon to nurse. And so I'm glad that we made it through the interview without hearing her screaming in the background there. Mommy, I need you. It's always fun to speak with you. I'm so glad that you come up by where we live twice a year so that we can see you. And then we make it down several times a year to keep that relationship going between you and I, as well as the kids. Well, you have a good day. Good night. Love you.
Bye.